The sound of sirens cut through the cold night air, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the glass windows of the towering buildings. Jason Statham stood frozen outside his car, his mind racing as he processed the unthinkable. His phone buzzed violently in his palm, but his eyes were locked on the squad cars skidding to a halt just a few feet away. Doors burst open. Officers swarmed out, hands gripping their holsters. "Jason Statham, hands where we can see them!" The voice boomed through the police megaphone, sharp, commanding, and dangerously final. Jason raised his hands slowly, his pulse pounding against his ribcage, his muscles tensed, instincts screaming at him to move, to run, but he forced himself to stay still. Running would mean guilt. Running would mean playing into their hands. This was a setup, and whoever did this wanted him buried alive. A burly officer, Sergeant Reynolds, stepped forward, eyes cold with determination. "Jason Statham, you are under arrest for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit organized crime." Jason's jaw clenched. Fraud? Bribery? Conspiracy? He had spent his entire career exposing corruption, not committing it. "This is a joke," he growled, keeping his voice even. "You know damn well I didn't. Hands behind your head. Now!" Jason didn't move. He looked past Reynolds, scanning the faces of the other officers. Some were avoiding eye contact. Others had their jaws set, like they knew something was off. And then he saw him. Standing at the edge of the scene, in plain clothes but with a badge clipped to his belt, was Ethan Marshall, Jason's closest friend, his brother in arms, the man he trusted with his life. Ethan didn't move, didn't even blink. His face was stone. Jason's breath hitched. No, it couldn't be. Ethan had been by his side through every battle against corrupt authorities, every war against injustice. If anyone knew Jason wasn't capable of this, it was him. And yet, Ethan wasn't stopping this. Jason's world tilted. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a goddamn execution. Jason clenched his fists as the officers moved in. He had to think, fast. "Where's the warrant?" he demanded, eyes locking onto Reynolds. "You can't just—" Reynolds pulled out a sheet of paper and held it up. "Signed by Judge Lawson. Your name is all over the financial records, Statham. Money transfers, offshore accounts, backdoor deals. The evidence is airtight." Airtight. Jason nearly laughed. Whoever had framed him wasn't playing small. This was precision work. Fabricated documents, digital trails, falsified transactions, all placed carefully to ensure he had no way out. Jason shook his head. "You really believe this? You really think I'm—" Reynolds stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Doesn't matter what I believe, Statham. The system believes it, and that's all that counts. That was it. The game was already rigged." A sharp click rang out as the cold metal of the cuffs snapped around Jason's wrists. "You have the right to remain silent." Like hell he did. Jason lunged. With a quick pivot, he spun around Reynolds, using the officer's own momentum to drive his shoulder into the sergeant's chest. The man stumbled back, gasping for air. Chaos erupted. Officers shouted, guns raised. Jason twisted, bringing his cuffed hands forward and swinging his fists in a controlled strike. One officer went down, clutching his ribs. Another reached for his taser. Jason kicked the weapon clean out of his hands. He wasn't trying to win a fight. He was trying to buy time. Because he knew one thing for sure. If they took him in now, he was never coming out. Jason's eyes darted to Ethan again, still standing there, still watching. "Ethan!" Jason shouted, shoving past another officer. "Tell them! You know I didn't do this!" But Ethan didn't move. Didn't even flinch. Jason's breath caught in his throat. The truth hit like a freight train. Ethan wasn't here to stop this. He was part of it. "Stand down, Jason," Ethan finally spoke, voice eerily calm. "You're making this worse." Jason shook his head, disbelief curdling into pure fury. "You did this." Ethan didn't deny it. "You should have stayed out of it," he muttered. "You had to keep digging, didn't you?" Jason's heart slammed against his ribs. This wasn't just a setup. This was a warning, a message from someone bigger, someone powerful. And Ethan, he was their weapon. Jason felt the barrel of a gun press against his back. "Oh, enough," Reynolds growled. "Get him in the car." Jason didn't resist this time. Not because he had given up, but because this fight wasn't over. Not even close. As the officers dragged him toward the squad car, Jason turned his head just slightly, enough to see Ethan's face one last time. "I'm coming for you." Ethan's jaw tightened. For the first time, a flicker of something, regret, crossed his eyes. But Jason didn't care. Whoever had done this, whoever had put Ethan in their pocket, they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because Jason Statham wasn't going down without a war. Jason sat in the back of the squad car, his wrists still locked in steel cuffs. His breathing was steady, but his mind was a storm of chaos. The flashing lights outside blurred together as the car sped through the city. The betrayal, the setup, the cold, empty look in Ethan's eyes. It all pointed to one thing. This wasn't just about him. This was bigger. He had spent months exposing the corruption within Oak Ridge gated community, an elite white-run HOA that had been illegally targeting black families, forcing them out through shady fines, forged violations, and outright harassment. But Jason didn't just expose them, he humiliated them. When he revealed that HOA President Roger Keaton had been embezzling funds, the man was arrested. It should have been over, but Jason knew better. Keaton was a small fish. Someone bigger had been pulling the strings. And now they weren't just retaliating. They were trying to erase him. The squad car took a sharp turn. Jason leaned back, forcing himself to think logically. If this was just about revenge, they would have tried to kill him outright. But they wanted him alive, wanted him to be seen as a criminal. Why? Because this was about control. If Jason Statham, the man who exposed them, could be painted as corrupt, then everything he revealed would be questioned. His credibility would be gone. The people he had fought for, the black families forced out of Oak Ridge, would lose their case. The real criminals would walk free. Jason clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about taking him down. It was about making an example out of him. The car pulled into the back of the precinct. As Jason was dragged out, a black SUV pulled up nearby. The door opened, and she stepped out. Vivian Langley. Powerful, ruthless. A name whispered in back rooms, feared in corporate circles. She wasn't just another corrupt official. She was the system, a high-ranking political fixer. Vivian was the force that made problems disappear. When Roger Keaton was arrested, her name was nowhere in the reports, but Jason had been digging. And now she was standing right here. Vivian smiled coldly as she walked up to him, not a speck of concern in her eyes. "You should have left it alone, Jason," she said smoothly. "You really thought taking down a small-town HOA president would change anything?" Jason didn't answer. Vivian sighed, feigning disappointment. "You're a fighter. That's what I liked about you." Jason's blood ran cold. "Liked?" Vivian leaned in. "Did you really think this was your first time going up against me?" Jason's eyes narrowed, and then it clicked. This wasn't just about Oak Ridge. This wasn't just about a corrupt HOA. This went back further. Way further. Jason's pulse pounded. What the hell was she talking about? Vivian smirked. "Don't worry, you'll remember soon enough." She turned to leave. "Make sure he stays put," she ordered the officers. "I don't want any more surprises." And then she was gone. Jason's mind raced. This wasn't just a conspiracy. This was personal. Jason sat in the interrogation room, his fists clenched under the metal table. The dim light above him flickered slightly, casting eerie shadows across the gray walls. Across from him, Detective Samuel Grayson paced slowly, tossing a file onto the table with a smirk. "You know, Jason," Grayson said, flipping open the file, "I expected better from you." Jason didn't flinch. He had been in enough interrogation rooms to know that the real game wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't. Grayson slid a series of photos toward him. Jason's bank statements, emails, messages, all fabricated, all designed to make him look guilty. Multiple wire transfers, Grayson said. Large sums of money funneled through offshore accounts, all linked to you. Jason's jaw tightened. And then there's this. Grayson pushed another piece of paper forward. A fake contract. One that made it look like Jason had been working with Roger Keaton all along. Jason exhaled slowly. They had thought of everything. This is ridiculous, Jason said. You really think I'd take money from the guy I helped put away? Grayson leaned in. I don't think. I know. The door swung open. A new officer stepped in, whispering something to Grayson. His expression darkened, then twisted into a cruel smile. Grayson looked back at Jason. You should watch the news. The screen on the wall flickered on. Breaking news. Jason Statham. Fraud, bribery, and more. The footage cut to a press conference. A stern-faced district attorney, Mark Caldwell, stood at a podium, speaking into a sea of flashing cameras. We have undeniable evidence linking Jason Statham to financial fraud and corruption within the Oak Ridge HOA. A man who once claimed to fight for justice has been exposed as nothing more than a liar and a criminal. Jason's stomach tightened. The camera then cut to a protest outside the police station. People shouting, holding signs, some supporting him, but most condemning him. The world was turning against him. And the worst part? It was working. Jason was pulled out of interrogation and shoved into a holding cell. He sat down, running everything through his head. Someone powerful wanted him gone. And then his phone vibrated. Confused, Jason looked at the officer guarding him. How the hell did he even have his phone? The officer, an older black man, gave him a knowing glance and turned away. Jason picked up. A disguised voice spoke, calm, calculated. You're not in here because of Roger Keaton. Jason's muscles tensed. Who the hell is this? Someone who doesn't want you dead, yet. Jason's grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean yet? A pause. Then, you exposed Roger, the voice continued. They run the city, judges, cops, politicians. They own them all. Jason exhaled sharply. This was bigger than he thought. The voice continued. You're not going to make it to trial. They don't need you convicted. They just need you gone. If you want to live, you need to disappear. Jason clenched his jaw. That's not an option. A sigh on the other end. Then you're already dead. Click. The call ended. Jason sat there, heart pounding. And then the lights cut out. Before Jason could react, the prison went into lockdown. Red emergency lights flickered on. And then gunfire. Screams echoed from the hall. Jason shot up, pressing himself against the wall. Something wasn't right. 2 officers ran past, shouting orders. Another one fell, taken out with a silencer. This wasn't a riot. This was a hit. Someone had sent people inside to kill him. A masked figure stepped into view, a suppressed pistol in hand. Jason didn't hesitate. The moment the figure moved, Jason exploded forward. He grabbed the man's wrists, twisted the gun away, and slammed him into the metal bars. Once, twice. The man grunted, dazed. Jason grabbed his gun, flipped it, and knocked him out cold. More footsteps. Jason turned. 3 more masked men approaching. No time. He spun around, grabbed the unconscious attacker's keycard, and swiped the cell door open. Gunfire ripped through the air as Jason sprinted down the corridor. He slid behind a wall, barely dodging another round of bullets. The exit was blocked,